Paradise Lost पे थोड़ी सी बात करेंगे. We have already discussed this poem in the class, so we will having a revision sort of thing about Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is written by John Milton. Milton was born in 1608 in London, and by his sectarian affiliation, Milton was Christian, a Puritan, and on his part, his major fame is due to the work named as Paradise Lost. And in his poetry, his grand and lofty style makes him popular among the poets. And apart from this, Milton has a great influence on the poetry of the coming ages. He lost his vision in the year 1653, and soon after that, he died in the year 1674. John Milton is famous for his major works, The Paradise Lost, and in response to Paradise Lost, The Paradise Regained. Apart from these two works, he had also written a tragic closure drama named Samson Agonistus, which is also very much famous. A closure drama is a play that is not intended to be performed on stage. स्टेज पे इनेक्ट नहीं किया जाता, परफॉर्म नहीं किया जाता, बल्कि एक सिंगल रीडर जो है वो इसको स्टेज पे पढ़ देता है. As far as Paradise Lost is concerned, Paradise Lost is a religious story. ये इस्लामिक ट्रेडिशन में भी इसका जिक्र मिलता है, कुरान पाक में भी, बाइबल में भी है. So Milton picked it from Bible, and it is about the very first sin of the man and the father of the man, Adam, and his first disobedience as God asked him not to touch this very fruit, this very thing, and then as response to his disobedience, Adam was exiled from heaven, and that is the theme of this poem. This is the same thing that we have already discussed, that the poem concerns the biblical story of the fall of man's temptation of Adam and Eve by the fallen angel Satan and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. John Milton as a whole stated this this poem, as having the purpose to justify the ways of God to man. Most of the time, Paradise Lost के हवाले से डिस्कस भी यही किया जाता है, whether it's a way to justify the ways of God to man. So Paradise Lost is the story of temptation and fall of man, and this story was presented for the first time by John Milton in Christian literature as having a full relationship while still being without a sin. So एडम और ईव को यहाँ पे डिस्टिंक्ट और पैशनेट पर्सनैलिटीज के तौर पे रिप्रेजेंट किया गया है, और सैटन इज रिप्रेजेंटेड एज एन एनिमी टू द मैन, एज एन एनिमी टू द ह्यूमैनिटी in the form of a serpent, and that serpent successfully tempts Eve. Satan could not tempt Adam, so feeling and finding Eve as a soft target, he actually disguised in the form of serpent and tempted Eve and forced her to eat from the tree that was actually prohibited, forbid by the God. And Adam later on learned that Eve had committed a sin. So he declared to Eve that since she was made from his flesh, they are bound to one another, and if she dies, he must also die. In this manner, John Milton portrays Adam not only as a brave figure but also as a greater sinner than Eve, who is fully aware that he is doing wrong. So Eve was actually tempted by Satan, and later on, Adam was tempted by the sin of Eve. That is why the writer has considered Adam as a greater sinner than Eve, because Adam had realized the mistake of Eve, even then he committed it. So what happened after they ate the forbidden fruit? So after eating that very fruit, Adam and Eve have a physical exposure, and not only physical exposure, but they had a physical relation. Adam is convinced that Eve was right about eating the fruit at first. So he considered it a beneficial act, but soon they fell asleep and had a terrible nightmare in the form of a terrible dream. After they woke, they experienced guilt and shame for the first time, and realizing that they have committed a terrible act against God, they mutually blamed each other. And on the other hand, Satan was very much successful. He returned triumphantly to hell amidst the applause of his fellow angels. He tells them that how his scheme had worked. He gives them complete domination over paradise. As soon as he finishes his speech, the fallen angels around him become hideous snakes. Satan himself turned into a snake, deprived of limbs and unable to talk. Thus they share the same punishment and share the same guilt. About Paradise Lost, it is an epic poem written in a black verse by the 17th century England poet John Milton. We have already discussed. The first version of the poem was published in 1667, consisted of 10 books with over 10,000 lines of a verse. The second edition followed in 1674, arranged into 12 books in the method of Virgil's Aeneid, with minor modifications carried throughout and a note on the versification. It is considered by critics to be Milton's major work. It increased his reputation as one of the greatest English poets of his time. Here is an image of the first edition of Paradise Lost. Here are certain points that must be remembered while discussing Paradise Lost as well as John Milton. So, this poem is written in the form of blank verse. You must be well aware of the fact that this is written in the form of blank verse. And Paradise Lost was written on the biblical theme of the fall of man. This is a universal theme, fall of man, the first disobedience of man, the justification of man's ways to God. And this is a biblical theme taken from the Bible, as well as we also call it a Quranic theme, has been discussed in the Quranic Park as well. The narration of the poem unfolds in the poem Paradise Lost. As soon as we go through the poem, the narration of the poem is unfolded. And Paradise Lost is two narrative arcs. It goes mainly about the two various ways. The first one is about the Satan, the Lucifer and his company, the Beelzebub and so on, and all other Satans, the fallen angels, and the other one is about Adam and Eve. So basically it revolves around these three major characters: Satan, Adam and Eve. Book 9 is the longest book in the Paradise Lost. Some of the times this question has been asked in the form of an objective and in the form of a short question, that which one is the longest book in Paradise Lost. Book 9 is the longest book in Paradise Lost, whereas book 7 is the shortest book in Paradise Lost. In the first edition of the Paradise Lost, 10 books were included. The remaining 2 books were included in the second edition of the Paradise Lost. You can say that initially it was a book with 10 chapters with 10 books, and later on the second edition included 2 more books, and thus it totally comprised of 12 books or 12 chapters. The second edition of the poem was published in the year 1674, whereas we have already discussed that the first was published in 1667. So here on we will discuss the short summary of Paradise Lost. Book 1. Book 1 gives us a brief introduction of the fall of Adam and Eve caused by the serpent, which was Satan, who led the angels in rebellion against God and was cast into hell. The scene opens with Satan lying in a confused state in the burning lake along with Beelzebub, who was next in command beside him. Satan exhorts his fallen legions on the shore, where he revives his spirit by his speech. They set to building palaces called Pandemonium. there the high-ranking angels assemble in council. पहली बुक में जनरल इंट्रोडक्शन दिया गया है कि कैसे एडम और ईव जो है वो सैटर्न के ज़रिए जो सरपेंट की शक्ल में उनके पास आया था का शिकार हुए, और हमें सैटर्न जो है वो वहाँ पे नज़र आता है औंधे मुंह जहन्नम के गड्ढे में पड़ा हुआ है, और उसके साथ बेल्ज़ेबुल है, और उसके अलावा उसके साथ जो उसके कामरेड सैटर्न्स हैं, फॉलन एंजल्स हैं, वो सारे के सारे वहाँ मौजूद हैं। और सैटर्न की स्पीचेस जो हैं वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हैं। वो वहाँ एक स्पीच करता है और अपने साथ फॉलन एंजल्स से कहता है कि अब हमने यहाँ पे अपनी जो हुकूमत है वो कायम करनी है, और हमने वहाँ पे एक पैलेस भी तामीर करना है, और वो सब लोगों को इकट्ठा करके अपनी फ्यूचर प्लानिंग करता है। In book 2, a debate is held whether or not to attempt recovery of heaven. A third proposal is preferred concerning an ancient prophecy of another world which was to be created, where the devils may seek to enact their revenge. Satan also undertakes the voyage to find his world. He encounters sin and death, his offsprings, guarding hell's gate. Sin unlocks the gate, and Satan embarks on his passage across the great gulf of chaos between heaven and hell, till he sights the new universe floating near the larger globe, which is heaven. In Book 3, we find that God sees Satan flying towards his world and foretells the success of his evil mission to tempt man. God explains his purpose of grace and mercy towards man, but declares that justice must be met nonetheless. His Son, who sits in his right hand, freely offers to sacrifice himself for man's salvation, causing the angels to celebrate in his songs of praise. Meanwhile, Satan alights upon the outer shell of the new creation, where he finds an opening to the universe within. He flies down to the sun, upon which an angel, Uriel, stands guard. Satan disguises himself as a cherub. He pretends that he has come to praise God's new creation, and thereby tricks the angels into showing him the way to man's home. Landing atop Mount Euphrates, Satan experiences disillusionment, but soon proceeds on his evil errand. He easily gains secret entrance to the Garden of Paradise. He wonders at its beauty and soon comes upon Adam and Eve. Looking them at their happy state, he becomes even more envious. He overhears them speak of God's commandment that they should not eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, lest they should pay the penalty of death, and thereby plots to cause them transgress. यहाँ पे आके हमें ये पता चलता है बुक 4 में कि जब सैटन वहाँ पे एंजल को धोखा दे के अंदर दाखिल हो जाता है, तो वहाँ पे एडम और ईव को बातें करते हुए सुनता है, और उसे वहाँ से पता चलता है कि गॉड ने ट्री ऑफ नॉलेज ऑफ गुड और इवल को टेस्ट करने से एडम और ईव को मना किया है, और साथ में ये वार्न भी किया है कि इफ दे विल टेस्ट इट the consequences would be paid in the form of death. तो एडम चूंकि जेलस हो चुका, सॉरी सैटन चूंकि जेलस हो चुका होता है एडम से, ईव से, और उनकी इस ब्यूटीफुल अबोर्ड से जो पैराडाइज, गार्डन ऑफ पैराडाइज है, तो वहीं पे प्लान करता है कि वो अब इन्हें ट्रैप करेगा और उन्हें फोर्स करेगा कि गार्ड ने जिस चीज़ से उन्हें मना किया है वो उस चीज़ को फॉलो करे। Uriel becomes suspicious. He comes to warn Gabriel and his angels who are guarding the gates of paradise. That evening, two scouts sent by Gabriel find Satan whispering in the ear of Eve as she sleeps next her husband. The scouts arrest and bring Satan to Gabriel, who expels him from Eden. Next morning, Eve relates to Adam a troublesome dream. वो जो सैटन ने सोते हुए उसके कान में कहा था, वो ईव जो है वो एडम को बताती है कि she had a troublesome dream and is comforted by him. God sends angel Raphael to visit the couple to warn them of their enmity. Next morning, Eve relates to Adam an upsetting dream and is comforted by him. God sends the angel Raphael to visit the couple to warn them of their enmity. Raphael continues to relate how Michael was sent to lead the faithful angels into battle against Satan, that was named as Lucifer at that time, and his army. Wounded and in disarray, Satan and his powers retreat. During the night, they invent weapons resembling cannons. In the second day's fight, when Michael's angels are confronted with these devilish devices, they become enraged and pull up the very mountains and hurl them at Satan's army. But the war continues unto the third day, when God sends Messiah, his son, to end the war. Riding forth in the flaming chariot, Messiah drives the rebels out of heaven and down into the hell. Raphael then relates to Adam how God sent his son, the Christ, to create a new world and new creatures to fill the place left by the fallen angels. The sixth day of creations are described. Adam desires to extend the pleasurable visit to the angel, relates to Raphael with what he remembers of his own creation, his first impression of the world and its creature, the Garden of Eden, and the first meeting and marriage to Eve. After repeating his warning to Adam, the angels depart. Satan returns to earth where he chooses the serpent as his best disguise. Next morning, when Adam and Eve go forth to their garden tasks, Eve suggests they go in separate directions. With great reservation, Adam finally agrees. The serpent finds Eve alone and approaches her. She is surprised to find the creature that can speak and is soon induced by him to eat the fruit of forbidden tree. Adam is horrified when he finds that what she has done, but at length resigns himself to share her fate rather than be left without her and eats the fruit also. एडम इसीलिए ग्रेट सिनर कहा जाता है कि he already realized that Eve had done something wrong. He knew that the act of Eve was a sin. But even then, to feel the same thing what Eve has felt, Adam also commits the same crime. He repeats the same sin. So after eating, they are aroused with lust and they lay together and then fall to restless sleep. They awaken to awareness of their nakedness and shame and cover themselves with leaves. Quran also says the same. In their emotional distress, they fall into mutual accusation and blame. They start blaming each other for what they had done. The guardian angel returns to heaven, sad for man's failure, and the Son of God descends to earth to judge the sinners. Mercifully, he delays their sentence of death many days, during which they may work to regain God's favor, and then in pity, he clothes them both. While tasting the fruit of knowledge, both Adam and Eve were actually thrown naked. They discovered each other's bodies, they discovered their shames. At the gates of hell, sin and death sense the success of Satan in their new world. They set out to build a highway over chaos to make future passage to earth easier. Satan meets them on his return to hell and marvels at the great structure. Upon his arrival in Pandemonium, the palace they had built, Satan boasts of his success to the assembly. Instead of applauding him, they can only hiss, for they and he have all been turned into snakes and their punishments from above. God instructs his angels what changed condition must prevail in the world now in a fallen state, while on earth Adam bemoans his miserable condition and the fate of the human race. He harshly rejects Eve's attempt to console him, but she persists and wins his forgiveness. She proposes that they commit suicide, but Adam reminds of her of God's promise that her seed should wreak vengeance upon the serpent. Moreover, they must seek to make peace with their offended Lord. God sends Michael and his band to drive out the sinning pair from paradise, but first to reveal to Adam future events resulting from his sin. The angel descends to Eden with the news of their expulsion, causing Eve to withdraw in tears. Michael leads Adam up a high hill, where he sets before him in vision what shall happen till the great flood. Michael continues in prophecy from the flood by degrees to explain who the seed of women shall be, the Savior which was promised, who shall redeem mankind. Adam is recomforted by these last revelations and resolves faithful obedience. He descends the hill with Michael and rejoins Eve, who is wakened from the gentle sleep, reconfirmed in alliance to her husband. A flaming sword is placed to bar the gates behind them as Adam and Eve are sent away from the paradise.